Welcome everybody here to the Lakers Lounge. I'm Anthony Irwin, today joined by somebody I frankly have dropped the ball on. I'm not going to lie. I should have had you on the show forever ago, especially seeing as you're rocking Vikings gear. You and I would say, Mike, that you and I probably text a lot more about the Vikings than we do about the Lakers, like significantly more.
You know, it's true, Anthony. It's a pleasure to be with you, first of all. The only caveat I would say is that, since the Vikings are, even when they're good, terrible, I'm not often seeking to have more conversations about them than the several text threads I have with my Minnesota friends, all my friends I grew up with, which are just dark text chats at this point. So, if you can, sometimes you'll provide a little levity as to what's going on with my favorite NFL franchise, but it's been a tough existence as a Vikings fan. Thankfully, since I've been employed by the Lakers, things have, it's brought out a whole new type of optimism as a sports person about me. And I'll throw the Dodgers in there as well. So shout out to the Lakers and the Dodgers.
Yeah, it's funny because one of the compliments that I get that is really backhanded, but it's a compliment nonetheless, is like, you're one of the few decent Lakers fans that I deal with, right? And it's always like, yeah, it's because I also exist as a Vikings fan, and I know that there are a lot of fan bases out there who are not as blessed as Lakers fans. And I have that direct kind of experience here with the Vikings that, like, before the first thing I said is, I don't know about wearing Vikings gear during a playoff run because it never ends well for the Vikings. But you know what? Here we are talking about the Lakers, and yeah, I would say it offsets the two experiences, just directly offset each other.
Yeah, it's an interesting perspective on. I want to focus on the Laker fan part of that because somebody that's not from LA, and my first exposure to the Lakers, like in a real way, other than just watching them on television for many years, I was a bit older. Like I was 26 when I first moved out, and I had already worked for about 4 or 5 sports organizations and a couple of different TV stations at that point. And I had this idea of what a Laker fan was coming from where I came from. And to put it at a base level, like I think a lot of people where I grew up in Minnesota just think of Los Angeles only as Hollywood. They don't realize that Hollywood is just a very tiny part of a 17 million person city that extends out into, if you extend out into like Orange County and all these surrounding areas. Like
Rodeo Drive doesn't extend for like 50 miles. It's not.
Yeah. That's I think how people think of that, so much so that when I got there, I was working for the Timberwolves when I got the Lakers job, and one of my bosses there started calling me Hollywood for the next 2 weeks, and I was just like, okay, so I get out there, and I think I like to think I was a little bit more cultured and had traveled to LA before than to think of a giant city in such of a context. So that was not necessarily my impersonation, but I have to say, and this might sound self-serving in a way, but it's not. Like, I was impressed with Laker fans right from the start, and I didn't get the sort of national perception of Laker fans because there are a ton of good and smart Laker fans.
Yeah.
And I think there are just so many that, yes, you're going to get some fans in any type of sport or anything, like sports as a metaphor for life. Think about this in terms of like political parties or at the worst end of the extreme. But with people that really follow something passionately, I've actually always way over indexed on what Laker fans are like, I think, relative to what the common perception out there might be.
Yeah, there's a bunch of super intelligent, decent Lakers fans out there, and then there's also Harrison. So it works out.
I'm going to push back. I'm going to push back here. If I had to rank you and Harrison, I would have.
Oh, no.
At the top, you several rungs below. Not at the extreme bottom, but well below Harrison. So I just want to state that for the record, in front of you and not behind your back. I would never say that behind your back, but now that I'm looking at you, yes.
It's a good thing this isn't live because I can edit that out, and because I'm about to talk to Harrison like right after this, so I cannot have that in the
recording on my phone, just in case you try to edit me. Because I've heard that you've done that before. Pete was complaining actually that you took some of what he said out of context, even though it was on the pod.
Yeah, I would never do anything like that. I would never edit like that episode of Succession where they bastardized what Logan was saying. I would never, ever, ever, under any circumstances, do anything like that.
Would would you be more or less comfortable than Greg was doing it?
Far more.
Yeah, because Greg, here's the thing. He's not uncomfortable at all doing it. He just wants to feign the discomfort in doing so. And now I know we're losing whatever amount of your audience doesn't watch Succession. But hey, you and I can talk about
it. Yeah, Greg is funny. Like he wants everybody to know I don't like doing this. I want everybody like this is not right. But hey, it was really well done. Like that line where he's just like, "Wow, it was really well edited." Like it's just so perfect.
I saw him in a Laker game. He was sitting.
Oh yeah, he's been to a few, right? Like I feel like
I only remember seeing him at one. He was sitting courtside, and he of course is hard to miss. Not just if you're a fan of Succession, because he's super gangly. It was fun to see him. I resisted the urge to make some sort of a reference to the show, although he's still at the stage where he probably welcomes most of the attention about it. There's kind of the honeymoon stage. It's not like I don't know, Anthony. Maybe at a certain point, though, even that, like when the 15th bro of the week comes up to him and says that he's a disgusting brother?
Yeah, disgusting brother.
It's like that. At a certain point, you don't want more bros coming up at you and say, "Hey, let's be the disgusting brothers."
Especially like somebody walking up to you, an actual representative of the Lakers in a suit and all that, like disgusting brother. Like,
yeah. So I passed on that. I just moved on.
All right. Speaking of moving on, I guess we should talk about last night's game. And there's really two minds to have about it, right? Denver fans are going to say, and are pretty much correct in saying, like, yeah, we got the one win. We have held serve to this point, and for the majority of that game, looked like the significantly better team. Lakers fans are going to say, well, maybe we unlock something. Maybe Rui on Jokic or somebody else on Jokic. I don't think it would just be Rui over the course of the game. With AD roaming, really impacts what Denver wants to do defensively. And if the Lakers can slow Denver's offense, I don't think Denver's defense can slow the Lakers' offense in the same way. That's where the optimism is going to come from the Lakers side of things. As always, I think the reality is somewhere in the middle there. But which way would you lean so far in those two takeaways?
Yeah, so the way I would frame it, and this will be a little bit different. I was talking about this with the aforementioned Pete and Darius last night, and I'm sure you've already weighed in on your pod. It's like, I think that when NBA series starts, there's always a certain level of energy that you can kind of bake in coming for one of the two teams. And like the Lakers were able to punch first against Memphis. Memphis just, I don't know if they didn't know better. A lot of young guys. I think they felt like they were better. That was going to start their run. And I don't know that they had like a specific plan for how the Lakers were going to play once the team was different after the trade deadline. And the Lakers were able to jump on that. Golden State, they had just played Game 7 on Sunday against Sacramento. Series started on Tuesday. The Lakers, I think, had the physical advantage in that series in a different way. Whereas even though Golden State hit all of the shots, they hit 21 threes in Game 1. The Lakers still sort of pounded them into submission. And that was and then you got the bounce back. Then you got the big energy home team game in Game 2 that the Lakers weren't going to be able to bring that requisite energy back to. Yep. So in this game, Denver, who has been off for a couple of days now, of course, having beaten Phoenix, they're sitting there watching the Lakers series and knowing they have full respect for LeBron and AD, because LeBron and AD kicked Denver's ass a couple of years ago, and it was Porter, it was Murray, and it was Jokic, and it was Michael Malone. So they were acutely aware of, I think, of what the danger that those two presented, with regardless of what the teammates were. And of course, it's a different team since then. And Jokic has been locked in to a degree that I don't think, Anthony, that he gets quite as much credit for the competitive level that he plays at, and for how hard he plays. Like his limitations, rim protection, for example, it's not necessarily for lack of effort. It's like KCP said last night, he just can't jump. He's not, but he is a grinder. He does really want to be great. He does play at a certain level every night, and he played Game 1 like it was Game 7. I mean, he came out. I said this on LFR. Like I have not, in my memory, seen a better performance from a Lakers opponent, one player, in a playoff game than those first three quarters. But then what happened in the fourth quarter? And this is to me why, like, yes, that's the reason why the Lakers lost the game. It's not the small lineup necessarily, although I think they're going to go away from that. A little add on to my own point on that. Like third quarter, they played the same small lineup and they were fine. They were +1 despite Murray hitting 2 threes, KCP having a little flurry. Like it's not just that group just wasn't quite ready to match what Denver was bringing. So that to me is the biggest factor.
Let alone exceed it, because when you're that small, you have to exceed it. You have to be like, when you're playing that small, you have to play with more energy than the team that's bigger. You have to be flying around out there, and that team wasn't.
Yeah, I think that's true, and it's also it's not just about the size and the stature. It's like you can take advantage of Denver in a way, and that's the whole reason they did it, so that Jokic can't hide on somebody. But it's not so, and this is where we get into the adjustments, which was really more directly what your question was. I think that it sometimes can be overplayed, or we can play the results. So, for example, last series, right? The Lakers held on to a couple of things within games, within Game 2 against Golden State, within Game 5. And then they sprung, quote unquote, the adjustments the next game. But it's not like those adjustments hadn't been discussed ad nauseum by both the Lakers staff and the Warriors staff. It's not like Denver didn't think that the Lakers were potentially going to use the shooter lineup or versus the Vanderbilt lineup. And, I'm sure you, as well as us and just people around the team, were discussing Rui, because guess what? He's the bridge between Schroeder and Vanderbilt, and that he can shoot, but he gives you more size and more rebounding. So it's to me, it's not like, if the Lakers just hadn't shown Denver that card, they'd have this big advantage in Game 2. I thought it was more important that they punched back and let Denver know, and Jokic even specifically, no. It's not going to just go like that. It did in the first quarter. Like, this is going to be a series. We do have different lineups that can work against you. And I don't think that Denver has the adjustment in their bag, other than basically playing Bruce Brown for MPJ or for Aaron Gordon, which I don't think they want to or can do for too long. So that's all.
Yeah, I was more on the side of starting Rui, and again, like you said, some of this is playing the result. Obviously, it went. Not only did I think it was wasn't necessarily the right approach, but also, it was really poorly executed. The Lakers, like you mentioned, and whether it's a matter of not matching energy or whatever, we can frame it however we want. But the Lakers were smaller and slower than Denver was at the beginning of the game, and if they start Rui, and the guys out there are all are that kind of lackadaisical, it doesn't matter who you start. Maybe they wouldn't be down 18 points. Maybe they get an extra rebound here or there. But at the end of the day, the guys who are out there also need to execute, and they didn't. So it just kind of compounded on the issues there. I do think though, it's been something, and I'm glad that you brought it up. The notion of, well, should they have kept that in their back pocket? Because you really want to steal the game, that you make that kind of adjustment, and you do something like putting Rui on Jokic and letting AD roam around. You really want to steal that game if you're going to do it. But it's not like I'm sitting here saying well, I would have rather lost that game by 30. Well, I don't. That doesn't make any sense.
Not only that, Anthony, the game plan was always that Rui was going to come in off the bench and have some minutes defending Jokic. But so it's not, they did that anyway. They didn't adjust to that. Jokic plays 42 minutes. You're not and Darvin Ham said this explicitly when we asked a couple days ago. It's we're going to start with AD on Jokic, and then kind of hinting, but if we went back and look at Jokic's numbers, this just speaks to how great he is offensively. I think we can all agree, at least you and I. Hopefully, people can agree that Anthony Davis is the best defensive player on the planet. I will accept a conversation about Draymond Green, who I still think is great, but I think AD is at this point is past him, and I think Jaren Jackson Jr. is kind of in that next. He's coming up next. He's awesome. Yeah. This is the reason why Anthony Davis was a little bit more limited in rounds 1 and 2, because they had those guys as either primary or secondary help defenders on AD. Yeah. And he just did everything else. And people were, well, what's going on with AD's offense? It's so that's one thing. But for this specific series, the plan was always to get AD off of Jokic some. It's just the question of how much can you do it. I think that AD prefers to be off of Jokic because
Yeah.
when he's on Jokic, he's still going to score. And then he's either backing you under the rim or he's bringing you out to the perimeter, and then AD can't rebound. So it's just
Yeah.
it's not so much an adjustment, it's the inevitable, I think, as to what happened. And now how does the series play out? Well, Denver has the advantage of the home team having one game won. So the Lakers are going to have to win, consecutive games now to try to get some of that back. But I do think that it was eventually going to get in that type of a space, and therefore Rui was always going to play more.
Yeah, it's just like the question moving forward is whether which approach is outweighed more by the other. And I also think, like you mentioned, AD maybe preferring to not guard Jokic, for a variety of reasons. It looks like it sucks to guard Jokic. Like he sweats more than the average NBA player, so you're just gonna feel that on you the whole game. But like I also think, and this was the case I thought in the Warriors series where AD wants to be extra engaged on defense. He wants to go up and help on the perimeter. He wants to see if he can handle the challenge of guarding Steph in space or whomever in space. And like he is this like super pterodactyl with an insane wingspan who can show high and still get back to the rim in time to either contest on that shot backdoor or just grab a rebound. And I think like when you just stick AD on Jokic and he becomes more of a stationary defender, malaise. I don't know if I wouldn't go maybe that so far as to call it like a malaise that sets in over AD, but I do think he just gets stuck in the mud, and he's so much more impactful. And I think his engagement level goes way up when he's flying all over the court. So like not only do I think that the Lakers found something there with Jokic as it pertains to like giving him a different look and seeing that as impactful as it was cool to see. But I also think that's how you keep AD the kind of special defensive player that he can be. And I think he's really, again, for lack of a better term, minimized if all he's doing is trying to stop Jokic from scoring, because he's not gonna. Jokic is too good.
100%. Even if he does it half the time, which Jokic's numbers against AD are much better than half the time so far.
Mm-hmm.
But even if he does it half the time, you're wasting what AD is one of he's the best of, I'd say, about 4 or 5 players in the NBA that can do somewhat what he does. I already mentioned Jaren Jackson Jr. Giannis, I think, can do that in most contexts. Evan Mobley can do some of that. And that's about it. There are a couple of other guys that, Draymond in a different way, I would throw in that mix, but like a guy that can protect the paint, that can get out to defend guards, that can move their feet, that can come over on the strong side, that can clear the big defensive rebound in traffic. That is why the Lakers defense is special. It's because of him. That's it. That's the whole reason. And all of those other guys that I mentioned, look at where Cleveland and look at where Memphis were, and look at Milwaukee. Now, Brook Lopez obviously helps, and so does Drew Holiday in Milwaukee, but those are basically the 4 best defenses in the NBA, and then throw Golden State in there. That's why, right? It's because you having that one player, and whereas there are, I don't know, 50 players in the NBA that can at least sort of stay solid while Jokic bullies them down into the paint, and then he turns and makes shots anyway. Now, he's going to make fewer in theory against Anthony Davis because he can actually go over the top and block a couple of them.
As we saw. Mm-hmm.
But like that's not, it's just not the best use of him. You're going to need it some possessions, no doubt. But I think that much is pretty clear after game 1.
What do you think can be done to get D'Angelo Russell going? He didn't play in the fourth quarter last night, and I think Darvin is really going to kind of prefer Schroeder's ability to stay attached on screens and running through screens and stuff like that. But you do need D'Angelo Russell to make an impact on this series. And, sometimes it's as simple as, just hope he's making shots that night or whatever. But like one unfortunate aspect I thought of going as small as the Lakers did was that like all of those guys were either didn't have the size advantage that they normally have personally. Like Russell is a bigger point guard, even though he doesn't like being called a point guard. He's a bigger point guard, but he was staring eye to eye with Kentavious Caldwell-Pope, right? Jamal Murray is bigger than Dennis Schroeder. Poor Austin Reeves was like He looked so small compared to Michael Porter Jr. And I think like with the Lakers potentially going a little bit bigger with that starting group, now you're looking at like maybe it's Murray guarding Russell and KCP guarding Reeves or vice versa, and maybe that makes the game a little easier on them. But is there anything that can be done to get the better version of Russell more consistently in the series?
Yeah, he'll be better. He'll be better. That was the worst case
Can't
scenario.
be much worse. Yeah.
That was the worst case scenario for him in game
Yeah.
one. It was a mix of so the two things. One is the initial energy burst that Denver had, that game seven desperation. D'Angelo didn't look great in game two against Memphis or against Golden State either. That
Hmm.
like he's not going to be the one typically to start with that type of energy. Like
Hmm.
he can kind of he'll feel his way out to an extent. And if okay, is this going to be a game where I'm going to get ISO opportunities, or is it going to be trail threes, or am I going to need to be getting AD in the pocket in screen roll? Like he'll kind of, especially with LeBron and AD clearly as that 1-2. D'Angelo is definitely not entering the game with that type of an alpha mentality. He will get it though in certain parts of the game where he feels that it's warranted, but that doesn't serve you well again in a playoff game where the other team is playing desperate. So that's sort of the worst case in some senses for him, and that won't be the same in game two. So I think he'll just for that reason I think he'll start better. Then the personnel situation where the Lakers were going small, the Lakers can benefit from that offensively, and they did in the third quarter. So he hit 3 of 5 shots in the third.
Hmm.
I mentioned the Lakers were +1 before he went out, despite some shot making. So like and that's because of Murray. Like he can just go get some work in on Murray, just like Murray can on him. But
Hmm.
that small lineup isn't intended just for that. It's intended so that Jokic has to play defense, and Anthony Davis murdered him on defense for the
Hmm.
entire game. So that's
Yeah.
where that lies. And then we get right back to the compromise. If the Lakers do go bigger and say they start Hachimura for Schroeder, then all of that kind of cascades down for D'Lo and his responsibilities in terms of like the athletic part of it and the running, and they just lessen a little bit, and he can stick to some more of the skill stuff that he's
Yeah.
done well for them. So I think that it will get better, and it's just way too soon to start thinking like, oh, I don't know, maybe they should just bench him and play Shooter those minutes. Like you got
Yeah.
to give him a second shot here to get rolling.
And look, he has utilized those second shots over the course of the playoffs, right? People have, I think, spent too much time talking about every other game AD, but like really, really, Russell is the one who either has it or doesn't. And then if he doesn't, it's a Schroeder game. And if he does, oh, cool, it's a Russell game, and the Lakers tend to win those. So that'll be interesting to watch which version of Russell. And like I also kind of like the point that you I think kind of hinted at it was um, like Russell is really good at being like the knockout blow that forces a timeout, right? The Lakers will have some momentum, and then he'll make the play that gets the crowd going or shuts the crowd up, and it forces a timeout. But in last night's game, because everybody was playing again kind of lackadaisically to start, I think he also kind of sinks into that. He very much goes as the team goes, and part of if the Lakers start more effectively, I think he'll really be a part of that, just because that's kind of how he's operated to this point.
Can
Um,
Anthony? I have a question for you.
hmm?
Can we formally bury the every other day nonsense AD take? So if you,
Yeah,
and this is not your take, I know, trust me.
no,
So Anthony Davis has now played 13 playoff games. He has had 3 subpar offensive games. 2 of those 3 were because the opposing team devoted, 80% of their initial attention on that end towards him, and were looking for the Lakers to try to beat them in other ways. The other game, he just didn't have great energy. And in 12 of those 13 games, he was otherworldly defensively.
yeah.
So I just wanted to see if I could get your permission to formally bury that narrative.
Yeah, I've been laughing at it basically all playoffs. It's like the take that I haven't seen enough like smart national people give is like we almost excuse Steph for being mediocre or less than mediocre over the course of his career defensively, right? So long as he makes an incredible offensive impact that everybody can see because we see what he does to the gravity on that end of the court. But for some reason, we don't allow that on the defensive side, where AD is like the math breaker that Steph is defensively. And, you know, some nights he's going to have it offensively, like last night, he scored his 40 points and all of that stuff too. But even on nights that he doesn't necessarily have it, he's still going to like have a crazy impact on the game on the defensive side of the ball. So like the every other game thing just kind of ignores an entire half of the court. I've always thought it was kind of a ridiculous take that really ignores a whole bunch of basketball. Last thing before we get you out of here, you are on your way like right after this to go check out Lakers practice. You were in the locker room right after the game last night, and you've been around the team as much as just about anybody on the face of the planet. What was the sense you got in the locker room after that game? Like where was their confidence level at? We can talk about like how fans feel about the two ends of the spectrum you have coming off of that game, but where would you say the team sat on that spectrum after the game?
Body language doctor Trudell. That sounds good.
I like it.
Sounds
I like
good.
it. Yeah.
In front of my your self compliment from earlier in the show. I body language doctor was feeling very positive.
Okay.
I think that the person that sets the tone for this, you won't be surprised to learn, is one LeBron James.
Austin Reeves. No.
Well, I'll make an argument for Austin in almost anything at any time. So if you want to go that direction, I'm right there with you. Austin was also good body language vibes. Although, I think he was tired. Did you see Austin played 42 minutes?
42 minutes.
I had to check after the game. I was like, wait a second. Because you didn't come out much, but 42 minutes, that's a lot of minutes.
Yeah.
And anyway, so LeBron, I think that LeBron, quicker than any NBA player and probably than most athletes, can size up and see what's coming in a series. And his mood, therefore, I think a lot of times dictates what is possible or what isn't possible for a team. And I think that you could feel that, for example, after the trade, like early that season, after the Westbrook trade, the start in that preseason, I think that you could kind of tell, like, man, I don't know if
even before the trade, to be honest, right? Like the other side of the coin was before the trade. He's like,
yes,
okay.
Well, but especially to just focus on, like, I think that, and guess what? I felt that same way. Like it just
we all did.
Going to be a tough mix. And now, like, I think that looking at how the game went and just looking with what the adjustments are and who's all of it, like all the supercomputer, all of the stuff, I think that he feels good that the Lakers have a chance to win the series. Not that they necessarily will, or that they're like not talking about favorites or percentages, but I think that is that's a good takeaway to have, as opposed to this team came out blitzkrieged in the first half, and we just didn't have the answers. That was not the sentiment in the locker room, and LeBron leads that. And then now, of course, though the Lakers have to actually win games, which is different from the previous series where they always at least held an advantage or were tied. And so they got to get out there and prove it. But I think that they have a plan that they think they can execute with the bodies that they have.
Yeah. That makes total sense to me. Well, you are incredibly busy, and you are out there in Denver, and you're on your way down there to practice right now. So I really appreciate you cutting out a little bit of time here. Don't appreciate as much the Harrison compliment. It's gonna take me some time to get over that, but
look, let me offer one more part of that. Now, first of all, it is genuine. But secondly, I don't want to be on the other side of like, basically, I don't want to get the Dylan Brooks treatment that he gave him on Twitter. Not to say that you don't have some ruthless parts of yourself. I feel like you sort of save those more for audio form. You use Twitter more to just sort of like poke the bear a little bit, but Harrison will just come straight up with some haymakers on there. Guys, humor.
And Mia, like they're just like this devastating combo.
And I like to think that I would like to think that this will solidify me permanently over you throughout history for him, and I never have to worry. And that's what I would like to have happen.
That's, you know what, we all have our priorities. But thank you very much, Mike, for hopping on again. Obviously, you know him from Spectrum and also the LFR Pod. They do great work there. He does great work with everything that he does. Thank you very much, man, for hopping on.
Thanks, Anthony. Good to see you. Say hello to the fam.
Yep.
And go Vikings.
Yeah.